Hi everyone. So now that we have a basic understanding of the chambers of the heart and the great vessels and the valves of the heart, and also the difference between the pulmonary and systemic circulation, I want to go through the blood flow of the heart. And again, I know I've said this a couple of times already in the previous videos, but it's really important to make sure that you get these the basic anatomy down of the heart and also blood flow, because it's really going to help once we get into cardiac physiology, especially when we look at the cardiac cycle. So the last video left off looking at this picture, and it actually goes through the blood flow. It writes it out for you. So if this helps, then that's great. Go through it, and it kind of, you have to go through, and number one is looking at number one, number two is pointing out what number two is. So that's great if that helps you. But if you need a little bit more, then we're going to go through the flow chart, a flow chart right here. So let me change my pen. I'm going to change my pen to a blue coloration because we're going to start with the entrance of the heart, where most of the time whenever you talk about blood flow of the heart, you start at the beginning, and the beginning starts with this right atrium right here. So you're going to have deoxygenated blood that is going to flow into the right atrium. So we are going to start with this pulmonary circulation. So let's go ahead and write down right atrium here. So blood is going, remember that atria are going to receive blood. So we have to talk about where it's receiving blood from. And it's receiving blood from this big giant vessel up here, and it's receiving blood from this vessel here. And these are going to be the vena cava. You can say vena cava, either one. I've heard it both ways. So the superior vena cava is going to be this big one up here, and it's basically draining the blood from the superior portions of the body. So let's go in and write superior vena cava. And that is going to dump into the right atrium. And also here is the inferior vena cava. And inferior vena cava is going to drain blood from the inferior portions of the body. And of course, they're going to be named by where they are going to be located on the heart, right? So let's put in the inferior vena cava. And that is going to dump into the right atrium as well. Let's take a look at this tiny little hole right here. One that we haven't, this isn't a great vessel. This is going to be a hole that is going to come from a blood vessel off of the heart. And it's part of this thing called the coronary circulation. So later on in another video, we'll talk about how the coronary circulation is going to be blood flow specifically just for the heart muscle. So there's going to be one vessel that's going to dump deoxygenated blood from the heart muscles and puts it into the right atrium. And that's called the coronary sinus. So coronary sinus. So that's going to go into the right atrium as well. All right, so now we have our blood in the right atrium, and we are ready to move it to the next part of the heart. So that's another thing that atria do. They are going to deliver blood to the ventricles, and so it's going to deliver to the right ventricle. You see, it has to pass through a valve first, though. So valves, I like to refer to them as doors because they are going to be open or closed. This one just happens to be open, and that means that blood is able to flow through it because it is open. We are on the right side of the heart, and it is going to be a valve between the atrium and the ventricle, and between the atrium and the ventricle. Remember, that is our right AV valve, but I want you guys to use other terms that are referred to these different valves. And this one is the tricuspid valve. All right. So from here, from the right ventricle, it is going to go to a great vessel next. Think about where it needs to go from here. What is the whole point of this pulmonary circulation? Okay, we are trying to get it to the lungs so we can dump off the carbon dioxide and pick up oxygen. So it is going to do it by going through this giant vessel right here, and that is the pulmonary trunk. To spell that right. But do you see how there's another door that it has to pass through? Blood has to pass through right here. And it looks like it's closed right now. So, but we'll talk about all the specifics behind that later on. But this is going to be the one that is between a ventricle and a great vessel. And those are going to be semilunar valves. So this is a semilunar valve. And of course, where it's going is going to kind of tell you which one it is. It's the pulmonary semilunar valve. So that's where it is. All right, so we're trying to get to the lungs, and I'll draw some tiny little lungs over here. That's not, of course, that looks more like a kidney, but hey, so those are the lungs. And remember that you have a right and left lung. I can't draw big giant lungs and what they would look like compared to the heart because that would take up my entire screen. But it needs to bring blood to the left and the right side. So it is going to, the pulmonary trunk actually splits into a couple of different vessels. And these two vessels are named by where they're going and which direction the blood is flowing. So remember, they are going to the lungs, so that is going to refer to that pulmonary part. So let's kind of move these, let's bring arrows out. So you have a left and right pulmonary, and it is bringing blood away from the heart. So these are pulmonary arteries. Whoops. Now remember how we were talking about arteries, they bring blood away from the heart, but most, but not all, are going to carry oxygenated blood. Here is that exception to that rule, that but not all rule. Here it is. See how it's going to be depicted as blue? These pulmonary arteries actually carry deoxygenated blood away from the heart. So there's your exception. All right, so these are going to go to the left and right lungs, left and right lungs. What are they going to do there? Why, they are picking up oxygen and dumping off carbon dioxide. So that means that we can change the color of the pen to red because we just picked up oxygen and we are all oxygenated. So let's talk about where it goes from here. Again, it has to come from the lungs, and it's going to go into these other great vessels that are continuous with the left atrium. Remember, left and right side, so you do have these as well over here. You can see these a lot better on the back portion, but they are going to carry it all the way and dump it in here. So they're a lot bigger on the back part, the posterior part of the heart. These are known as, again, it has to do with where it's coming from and the direction of the blood. So they are coming from the, whoops, not an R, just want to write my name or something like that. So let's take off that. So they are coming from the heart, so pulmonary. And they are bringing blood to the heart. So these are going to be pulmonary veins. Now remember, there was that, and you have left and right. Remember there was that, on that slide, it said veins are going to carry blood to the heart, but most, but not all, are going to carry deoxygenated blood. Here is the exception to the veins, not all rule, is going to be this pulmonary veins. So the two pulmonaries are going to be the exceptions to your artery and vein rule as far as carrying what type of blood. So is the fetal circulation that we'll take a look at. And I believe we take a look at it in this chapter. So is blood vessels in the fetus that we'll take a look at later on. So now we are carrying these, we're putting those into the left atrium. So we are on the left side of the heart, which means, and we also have oxygenated blood, and that means we are, of course, in the systemic circulation or systemic circuit here. All right, so blood is in here in the left atrium, and it needs to go down to the left ventricle. So you see how it passed through a door, it passed through a valve. And remember, this is on the left side of the heart, and it's in between the atrium and the ventricle. So this one is going to be your bicuspid. See if they'll let me write it. Yay, bicuspid valve. And remember that you can also call it the mitral valve, whichever one that you want to refer to it as. All right. So from here, we need to get the blood to the rest of the body. The whole point of the systemic circuit is to get this oxygenated blood and get it to all of those systemic cells. So the cells can undergo cell respiration with the oxygen and the nutrients that are in the blood. It also needs to pick up carbon dioxide. So it's going to go from here, and it's going to pass through that big giant vessel. And that is going to be the aorta. But again, you see how it passed through another valve, and that one is going to be between the ventricle and another great vessel, the aorta. So it's going to be a semilunar valve. And of course, it's going to be the entrance to the aorta, so it's the aortic semilunar valve. And after that, it goes to the systemic cells. And it starts the whole process again. So after the systemic cells is going to, again, it's going to dump off its oxygen, it's going to pick up carbon dioxide, it's going to dump off nutrients, pick up wastes, and then it's going to start the whole process again, over and over again. So we will look at later on in another section, we're going to be taking a look at what causes these valves to kind of open and close, what specifically moves the blood throughout the entire chamber of the heart. So that's why it's really important. Again, I think I said this for 4 times now already. Make sure that you get this basic anatomy down. And of course, there's still a lot more of the heart anatomy to go through as well. But this is really, really important to make sure that you understand this flow chart and know what goes where and where it's actually located. So until next time.